your growth has to happen not just in solitude, because that's necessary, but it needs to happen in community. And the reason it needs to happen in community is not so that everyone does what you want them to do, but so that that's where the rubber meets the road, right? Like they are the mirror that remind you. So put that in practical terms. It's going to be very hard for me to lose my patience if I'm just sitting in my office by myself all day. But the minute somebody comes and says, oh, I didn't get the work done, and the difference is how I respond. Do I respond by flying off the handle, or do I respond by trying to keep my calm, even in the face of the challenge? That's what I'm interested in. And so you need those situations, individuals, all these other things that present to you the mirror so that you can look at yourself and say, okay, now what do I do? How do I respond?
Welcome to the show. I'm Jay Scherr, host of Business Minds Coffee Chat, where you get a captivating look inside the minds of game changers, risk takers, and visionaries who turn ideas into breakthroughs that shake up the world. Our mission is to give you fresh ways to think that spark growth in your business and life so you can make a mark that lasts. Anything in particular that I left out that you think is relevant to our conversation today?
Gosh, thank you for asking. I think something that is not part of my regular introduction, but I think informs a lot of the way that I move through this world and even the work that I do is I grew up overseas. And overseas doesn't really mean anything if you don't know the base, but I'm from the Caribbean, born in Brooklyn, grew up in North Africa and Europe, but spent every summer with half of it being in East Flatbush, Brooklyn, and the other half being in a rural village in Haiti. And what it taught me is really everybody is human, and the ability to actually try to at least understand different perspectives. And that just informs a lot of the work that I do.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that additional context. I knew part of that, but you definitely added some that I didn't know, and I appreciate that. And that definitely does explain a lot, and also certainly adds to you being an exceptional coach and leader yourself. So with all of that said, I would love it if you would share with all of us what your favorite thing is about yourself.
I think my favorite thing about myself is that I'm really curious about just the human condition. I'm curious about humans.
Okay.
And I always have been. I think it's really interesting. When I was younger, I was to the point that like the whole cliche of, curiosity killed the cat, like that was all about me. I'd get in trouble all the time because I was curious about what were people doing. So people called it nosy. I think it was curious. And then I wanted to, at some point, I said, I think I'm going to become an anthropologist. And, my parents were like, no, you're not. Like, that's not practical. You need to make a living. And so come full circle, here I am in my mid-50s, and I think about the work that I do, which is executive coaching. But in a way, I feel like I'm still sort of an anthropologist because leadership are still about human beings and humans. And so I do think that is something that I like about me, that I am curious about how humans are and why we are the way we are, and trying to understand, like, what the heck are we doing here?
Yeah. That's so interesting. At what age had you had that conversation with your parents that you wanted to be an anthropologist?
Okay, so I should backtrack, and I'm probably being tangential here, but like the original thing that I wanted to be when I was younger was what I called I wanted to be a cheese expert, and everybody laughed at me because they were like, there's no such thing. And now there's cheese, what do they call them? Cheesemongers or cheese. So I'm like, you see, I could have been that. So
who knew?
Who knew that? But the piece around the anthropology was in high school. It was in high school, and it wasn't like I really studied it. I think I had heard about it, and it was about studying people in their different habitats. And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
And yes, they were like, yeah, no, we're not paying for 4 years of college for you to go be an anthropologist.
Oh, that's too good. I would have liked to have seen how your life would have turned out going down that path.
I have no regrets. I feel at the end of the day, I really do believe that like, it doesn't really matter what you call your profession as long as you're expressing that one thing. And for me, the one thing is I have a very deep desire for people to live with a little more ease and to experience life with a little more ease. So to be honest, Jay, I feel like no matter what I do, that will always be what I'm doing. I could have been a teacher. I could have been a doctor. I could have been an executive coach as I am now. I could have been a librarian. I could be the person standing on the corner with the sign, and it would still, that theme would run through it, you know? And so that's, you know, for me, it doesn't really, I don't have any resentment around like, they didn't let me become an anthropologist, because at the end of the day, I still feel I expressed the thing that I probably felt like I wanted to express back then.
Yeah, that is so well said. So you talk a lot about beliefs. You talk about limiting beliefs, and we're going to explore that obviously in our conversation today. But as I was reading your book and as I was thinking about that, it reminded me of how beliefs shape our worldview, that they also obviously can have a substantial impact on what we choose to do or don't do in life and the actions that we take. So what was a belief that you had about yourself early in life that you discovered later wasn't true?
Gosh, we're digging deep here. So here's what's coming up for me. I think, you know, when you paint it that way, right, around a belief that I had about myself that I then discovered later in life wasn't true, is one of the beliefs that I name in the book. And it's the belief of I don't belong here, right? This belief of not feeling like I belonged in any particular community. And that was a result of the upbringing that I shared with you from the beginning, right? I was changing schools a lot, moving from country to country, often in countries where people didn't look like me. There was no mirror for me to feel. I could feel that I wasn't home. People treated me as though I wasn't, you know, quote unquote home. And so there was this sense of really actually wherever I went, feeling like I didn't necessarily belong. And that impacted a lot of my actions in two ways. One, in terms of sort of staying quiet in certain situations or holding back and not building connections. And then in other situations where I tried to overcompensate, right? Like kind of force myself into belonging, you know, sort of demanding that people included me, right?
Were you good at that?
I was, but you know, Jay, I never felt good about it after. Because what I came to understand much later in life, I did not understand in the moment. Now I can sense when I'm doing it, and I course correct, right? Because I have enough of a presence. But back then, the reason I didn't feel good about it after the fact is because in what I was doing to feel like I belonged is I would abandon a part of myself, right? I would sort of appease what folks were saying, act like the way they were acting, you know, get along, right? Do what they do to get along. And that was not sustainable. And it's so interesting because I remember probably the watershed moment where I was like, oh gosh, do I really do that? Was the same person that I name in the book, who you named at the beginning of this episode, Arden, right? Who we were somewhere and he was like, what are you doing? Like, who are you? And I was like, well, what are you talking about? Because I was shape-shifting. But now I've come to know, you know, I think what's different, the belief is not there for me anymore because I really do believe that I belong wherever I am, right? And so there's this level of comfort and ease that I now have, no matter where I am, no matter what the situation, to just sort of accept, because it's true, right? I'm here. And if I'm here, then I belong. Until I'm not here anymore, then that, then it's not, my belief isn't valid anymore.
Well, first, I'm so glad that you've come full circle and that you've come to that realization.
Yeah.
But as you were sharing that, I was just from a place of curiosity. Do you recall at what point in your life, what age you were when you, let's just say, had the self-awareness to recognize that you were experiencing this and you could put language around it?
Mm-hmm. Of course, yeah. Whenever I felt sort of a sense of being the other is when I became aware, right? The first moment, and I remember probably my earliest memory of this is when I was probably about 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old. Mm-hmm. And I remember I had to go to a different school because, first of all, I did not like school, right? And I think that's common for a lot of entrepreneurs, by the way. I did not like school. So I was a pre-K dropout. My mom sent me to pre-K and I was like, this is about the stupidest thing in the world. Like, what do you mean we have to come here every day for half a day, by the way?
And you must have been something.
And sing songs and take a nap, right? I'm like, this is ridiculous. So, kudos to my mom. She pulled me out. So I was a pre-K dropout, didn't know what to do with me. We were living overseas at the time. And that was at a French school because my first language was French. And one of their friends said, well, why don't you send her to the American school? Because she's an American citizen, send her to the American school. So I didn't start till kindergarten, but I didn't speak English. I only spoke French. And there was, in kindergarten, when the kids had to go out and play recess, I had to stay back because I had to learn English. So that was the beginning of the I'm different, right? I should be out there playing, but I'm not. I'm here. And I started noticing or becoming sensitive to that, right? To those moments where the only way I can describe it is there was this otherness. But nobody had taught me. And by the way, it wasn't developmentally appropriate. Like, of course, that's the way I made sense of it as a 5-year-old, right? It was normal for me to make sense of it like that as a 5-year-old. And what's important is not so much what happened, right? That it wasn't so much that I wasn't let out to recess, is that there was no situation where somebody could try to explain to my 5-year-old, no, this is not about you being lesser or different or other. This is just simply the fact that you need to learn English. That's all it means, right? And so that is when going back simply to your question, that's when it sort of started for me. But it's not so much, again, the situation, it's the explanation of the situation that then created this belief.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And when I think about that story, I can, as you were sharing it, I could put myself in a very similar situation, context being a bit different, but age and timeline being somewhat similar, and the way that I felt and the storyline that I was telling myself at that age about not being worthy, not being able to form relationships, not being as good as the next person, and that comparison at such a young age. And I'm not pointing fingers at anyone in particular. It's just the reality of the situation. But those beliefs we carry with them for so long. I still carry many of those with me today, right? Yeah. So I'm a work in progress. But it really is fascinating to think about it. And you talk about this, of course, but that those early experiences that we have so much to do with how we show up today in our lives, how we show up in our communities, as we show up as leaders, as coaches, as parents.
That's right.
And what I love is, you mentioned Arden, your husband, and you mentioned at I believe it's in the acknowledgments at the end of the book. You mentioned, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but you mentioned something about him and being the one who held up the mirror so you could see become your true self, or get in touch with self. And when I saw that, I wanted to explore that more deeply, because this to me this goes to the fact that leadership, and I know you've said this before because in my due diligence I've heard this, that leadership is an inside job. That's where it starts. It starts from within. And knowing ourselves, and this is why your book connected with me so deeply, because it not only is it an exceptional leadership book, but it's about leading ourselves before we lead others. It's philosophy, it's psychology. It's got all of the different variables that just make my hair stand up. So it really does. So tell me a little more. Let's unpack the topic of self. We've been talking about it a little bit here, but I want to find out more from you about discovering yourself, how Arden played a role in that, and who else in your life has participated in holding that mirror up for you so you can become the person who you are today.
Yeah, thank you. Gosh, there's so much there. So first of all, I think I will, as long as I am here in this on this physical earth, I'm committed to figuring out who I am, right? So who I am today is who I am today. I don't know if it's, this whole notion of self, I liken it to sort of coming back home. And I sort of see that, it's the whole hero's journey story, right? Like to me, that's what my life is all about. So I point out Arden specifically because I think he probably was the individual that I resisted the most, even though he was my husband, or is my husband, resisted the most in terms of being able to actually see myself in. Why? Because of all these beliefs that I had about what a relationship is supposed to be, right? Which is the person's actually going to be like you and you two shall become one. I mean, all the stuff we hear, right? Well, you know what? We're like 35 years in. So you unlearn a lot of that stuff. But the reason why it was the mirror is because it forced me to look at what my responsibility was, right? How I was contributing to certain dynamics. It forced me to understand how I was relating to another individual in a way that I actually cared, right? I was pretty good at compartmentalizing, and I share some stories about me and work, right? I was pretty good at pissing people off at work and being completely fine with it. So they couldn't be a mirror. But here was somebody who I actually really deeply cared about. And they weren't reacting to me the way that I needed them to react. And I couldn't. So it took, Jay, I'm not going to say this happened in the first 3 years that we met. It was years later that I did exactly what I'm suggesting in the book. I stopped trying to control the response and started to say, okay, how can I learn from this relationship, right? How can I learn about me? Not focus on the other, not focus on how to change, which, by the way, everybody says don't do that. Oprah said, don't try to change the other person, not focus, but look, how is it reflecting parts of me? Because the issue is not the other person. The issue is what the other person is reminding you of. So it's reminding you of the things that we talked about before, right? The things that I was younger, and so that's what I called the mirror. He was the mirror that allowed me to remember a lot of these beliefs that I had and recognize that I had not, they weren't serving me anymore, but I didn't know. And without that type of mirror, sometimes it's hard to be able to do that. That said, I now, the other big mirror for me have been my kids, right? They have been my kids because the way that they respond to things, I have to check myself. But I now am at a place in my life where, quite frankly, it's so easy to say, I'm going to do the inner work in isolation and let me go, lock myself in a cabin and, well, of course, everything's peaceful there. You don't have to deal with the messiness because the messiness is other humans, right? Why? Because they're the mirror. They're the mirror. And so I now see that your growth has to happen not just in solitude because that's necessary, but it needs to happen in community. And the reason it needs to happen in community is not so that everyone does what you want them to do, but so that that's where the rubber meets the road, right? Like they are the mirror that remind you. So put that in practical terms. It's going to be very hard for me to lose my patience if I'm just sitting in my office by myself all day. But the minute somebody comes and says, oh, I didn't get the work done. And the difference is how I respond. Do I respond by flying off the handle, or do I respond by trying to keep my calm, even in the face of the challenge? That's what I'm interested in. And so you need those situations, individuals, all these other things that present to you the mirror so that you can look at yourself and say, okay, now what do I do? How do I respond?
Wow. I love that.
It's not easy, though. I'm going to tell you that much.
Definitely not easy.
It's not all roses, but I carry it with so much more grace and compassion and like lightness, like I'll laugh about it now versus, 10 years ago, I was like, why can't I? Oh my gosh, why can't I? And now it's like, no, actually, this is life, right? Yeah. And this is leading. This is leading. You're going to face the challenges. They're going to be there. It's not about getting rid of the challenges. It's about how can you respond to the challenges differently? And or how can you experience the challenges differently? And you have that in your control.
That is so good. Now, I will just tell you flat out that I went to therapy to learn some of the tools and strategies that you are talking about right now, to learn, to understand when that mirror is held up, that the issue is me. The issue is not the other person or the environment or the situation I'm in. It's me. And I've learned, and I'm still learning, to control the controllables, as I like to say. There are plenty of things that are within our control. Obviously, there are things outside of our control. But those things, if we don't control them, then why would we put our energy and our focus into those things? Yeah. We don't control the outcome, but we do control or have control over our attitude, the amount of effort we put in, the skills that we learn and acquire, ways that we can work to improve ourselves. But at the end of the day, the outcome itself, that's completely outside of our control. Yeah. So this truly is fascinating, and I appreciate you sharing more context around that mirror and maybe pulling the lens back a little bit on your own personal experience, because clearly that has led to where you are today. And, we talked earlier about being a work in progress, right? That even though we learn many of these tools and strategies, we're still challenged with them. So,
of course,
which tool am I going to pull out of the toolbox? As long as I've got them available to me, then I can pause for a moment. So I take the example of when you're in a frustrating conversation or a very difficult conversation and you feel triggered, you feel like you're getting pulled into something. How are you able to slow that down, slow your breathing down, pause before you respond, count to 10, whatever it takes for you to be able to manage through that effectively? And I think that's amazing. So when you feel that you're confronted with something that does trigger you today, with everything that you've learned, where do you Can you share with all of us where you begin to feel that?
For me, it's very
where do you
clear.
feel it in your body?
I feel it right here. Like I feel it right in my chest.
You do? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so you know it's coming.
I can feel it.
Okay.
I don't always catch it.
Right. Right.
And look, I don't, here's the thing. I'm a very outcomes driven person, and part of my journey has been to have to be like, okay, not everything has to have an outcome, right? Like you got to focus on what's happening now. And part of that means that I don't beat myself up when I, lose the patience or let the, trigger get me, or because how else am I going to learn? Like, where does the growth happen if I never get it, quote unquote, wrong? I remember when my kids were much younger and we were trying to teach them how to ride a bike, and they must have been like 6 or something. And they were the only kids out there with, this will tell you again a little bit about Arden. They had helmets on, but no knee pads, elbow pads, all the things that kids put on these days. Okay. And I was, of course, like every time their bike would wobble, I'd be like, oh my God, no, go. And he stopped me and he was like, listen, we have 2 very different approaches to how we're teaching them to ride the bike. He said, you're trying to teach them to keep from falling. I'm trying to teach them that if they fall, they can get back up and ride the bike. So we got to let them fall. And I said, okay, so I don't have the capacity right now to watch them fall. So I'm going to go back inside the house and you keep teaching them how to ride the bike, right?
That's a great analogy for life too.
Right.
In general.
Exactly. And so I share that story because I think this notion of, let me not, even in this like leadership growth, leadership development, personal development, when the outcome is I'm going to do all these things and do all this personal development stuff so that I don't get it wrong. I think that's counterproductive, quite frankly. I think you want to open yourself up to, that's why we call it, in terms of practice. It's a practice. Practice is where it's okay to not get it right because you learn when you don't get it right. So that when you get to the tournament, when you get to the high stakes, when you get to the big moment, you have practiced enough that you can now go in there and give it your best shot. Well,
so I equate it to meditation as an example for those that are watching and listening. Absolutely. I call meditation a meditation practice for a reason. That's right. We don't become an expert at that.
That's right.
We're constantly learning.
Yep.
But we have to show up and we have to sit on the cushion however we choose to meditate.
Exactly. You sit on the mat, right? And it's like I mean, Jay, it took me years after I called myself a meditation practitioner to recognize like, first of all, there is no point. And second of all, the juice in all of this, like what makes it, kind of juicy is not the like staying on the breath. It's actually the moments when you leave the breath and you notice that you left the breath.
Yes.
That's the part.
It's the noticing.
Like years. So when you say, where do I notice it in my chest, and I pay attention to it more now. I used to not, I used to not pay attention to that at all. But now I do. And I'm like, okay, something is off. That's what it's telling me. There is something that's off right now. So pay attention. That's all it tells me.
It's interesting. I feel it first in my head, like almost right above my forehead. And then I start to feel it in my chest, and I feel my actual inner temperature begin to rise. And to your point, it's the noticing. So you obviously talk a lot about self-awareness and why that's so important. When we can recognize it, and we're paying attention to it, that's when we can actually do something about it. It's when we don't have the awareness where we then fall into that cycle, that pattern where we either get triggered or flooded, whatever it happens to be. And then later we say, what, I can't believe I did that. Why did that happen? Why did I respond that way?
Right.
So
exactly.
Yeah. So I want to talk for a moment about the 7 hidden blockers. So you outline those 7 hidden blockers in Leadership Unblocked. And what I love about your approach here, this again goes to show me what type of coach you are. So not only do you talk about each of those hidden blockers, but then obviously you go further, right? You talk about root cause, you talk about the impact or potential impact of those blockers. And then, of course, we talk about, okay, well, how do we unblock these, right? And you do such a fantastic job through stories with each one of those. So obviously, we're not going to be able to go through each and every one. But what I would like to do is, could you give our audience, why don't we take 2 of those 7 hidden blockers? Why don't we, and you've already given one of them, right? But why don't we share 1 or 2 of those, and let's walk through the hidden blocker itself, the potential impact of that hidden blocker, the why it's important to get to the root cause of that, and then how do we unblock from this? So you choose. You pick the one that
I want you to choose.
You think would make sense for us.
Okay. All right. I'll choose. Let's see. Well, why don't we start with I need to be involved?
Okay. That's a great one.
And I need to be involved is literally the belief that and by the way, these beliefs are like very quiet. We're not even aware that they're driving us. And I think this is what was important, right? What I figured out with my clients, and I had done myself, is that, I would start coaching them and we would move to action, right? We would have the action plan. Here are the 10 things you're going to do to move the needle on these things. And it would be great, except a couple months in, they'd be right back where they started. Okay. And what I started realizing was there's something else that needs to also shift in order for the work to be sustainable, because I want the work to be sustainable. And that's when I started, sort of getting more curious about this inner operating system as it relates to leaders. And so the beliefs are these quiet voices, assumptions, stories that we tell ourselves about how we need to lead. And one of them is, I need to be involved. I need to be involved. I need to be in. And so how does it look? It is, you want to be CC'd on all the emails. You're in all the meetings. You're weighing in on all the decisions. And by the way, this is a huge one for people who are entrepreneurs and startups. And it's not that the belief is bad. It serves you really, really well when you are a startup, right? When you are an entrepreneur. But when you're trying to scale your company, or you now have a team, it no longer serves you well. And that's the point. It's not about that these are bad. It's just that they don't always really help you in every capacity. So there's a cost with I need to be involved when you're trying to grow, quite frankly, when you're trying to grow your company or you're trying to grow your team, because you're blocking them from growing because you're there doing everything instead of them doing it. So the first part is recognizing that that's what's at play.
Okay.
And then you can start, and let's sort of say what's the root of that, right? The root of the I need to be involved, and for all of the beliefs that I outlined, they really are rooted in 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 of universal fundamental human needs that we all have. The need to feel worthy, the need to feel safe, and the need to feel connected. Okay? And so when you think about I need to be involved, at some point along the way, the reason why you carry that as the belief that is going to lead to success is probably because by being involved, you were safe, meaning you didn't get in trouble, nothing went wrong, everything was good, right? So there's this safety, definition of safety. And the other was it satiated worthiness. You
Yeah,
probably
that's where I
had
was
a
going.
boss, exactly, a boss who was like, I love that you're involved, right? You're doing all the things. Or maybe you had a parent or a caregiver who was happy that you were involved in everything, right? And so there was something that sort of gave you the message that if you're involved in everything, you are deemed quote unquote worthy. Okay. Which is again, fine until it's not anymore, so this is why this is all very situational, very situational. Okay. So the first part is recognizing that might be the belief that's driving you. And the exercise that I like to do with clients who face this particular one is say, okay, like, what are you involved in now? Okay. How is that helping you? How is that not helping you? Let's fast forward a year from now. What would you want to be involved in and why? What's the purpose? And a lot of times for my clients, the way this shows up is I really want to be able to be more strategic. I want to be able to sit at the table where we're making the strategic decisions. I want to be able to even take time off. I want to be able for my team to be more responsible. Okay, so if that were the case, what would you need to be involved in and what would you not need to be involved in relative to today? And we do a point-by-point comparison. When they are able to define what success looks like under those new terms, then I reverse backwards and I say, okay, what would you need to believe in order for that to be true?
Okay, and so you're asking them to start with the end in mind, right? We're time
for
traveling
this particular
a bit, right?
one,
For this one, okay.
Yeah.
Then we're working backwards, right? So you're really trying to get them to paint the picture of what the future state looks like
in terms of involvement.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay, very good.
And what it would do for them. Because it's, I don't believe, like, this is why a lot of times there's so much shoulding in leadership work. Like, one of my, not pet peeve, I shouldn't say it that way. But something I push back on my clients a lot is whenever they ask me, well, what's the best practice for this? I'm like, we're not going there because there is no best practice. This is all very situational. You're at a level where it cannot be cookie cutter. So I need them to define what that future looks like, right? What are the conditions of success for them? I don't own it. They own it. And they say, okay, if that's what you want, which by the way, is probably one of the hardest questions that my clients often have to answer is when I just say, well, what is it that you want? Okay. Because if you can figure out what you want, we can then dial back and figure out how to get there, but you have to have clarity around what you want. Okay. And so then we can say, okay, well then what is the belief that would actually help that happen? That would increase the probability of that happening. And that's when they'll say, okay, well, I can do anything, but I can't do everything. Okay. Or I need to prioritize where I'm involved, or I need to be involved in areas where I truly add value, which inherent in that is a different definition of what their value is at this point in time. So it's not a instant, like you go from I need to be involved to this particular belief. It doesn't work that way. I think part of the work is really, and this is what it means to adult, right? Which is what leadership is. It's you start creating, well, what is the belief that is actually going to help me now? Because that is under my control. It does not have to be what I've been taught or what I've been told or what helped me in back. What is the assumption that I need to make today to help me, the team, the organization flourish in this particular circumstance?
I love this. This is so good because it's so much deeper than, hey, just like you said a couple minutes ago, just give me the top 3 things I need to do. Yeah. And I mean, if you really, and what I really appreciate, and then I want you to go back to what you were gonna say next, but what I really appreciate is that you learned from, you were working with your clients, outcomes based, and you realized that they would go back to what they were doing before. So you weren't deep enough. We weren't working on the inside. Yeah. Right. And once you discovered that, that's where you were really able to start to shift the belief systems. That's right. And get, which I absolutely love. That's phenomenal.
Yeah. And Jay, I think that, 20 years ago when I started doing this work, I didn't have the capacity or capability to do what I'm suggesting now. Right? So there's a development, I think, that even as a coach, and it's not even as a coach, I think anyone, right? Like as a teacher, as a parent, as anyone where you're relationally involved in some way, you cannot, I didn't make this up. This is what like all adult development theory is based on. You cannot help grow another's capacity if your capacity is limited to a certain point, right? Like,
that's right.
I can't coach my daughter to play tennis at a national level if I only have understanding or the capacity to understand and apply at a junior level. It doesn't work. The math isn't mathing. And
you can only coach that person, but so far.
That's right. And it doesn't mean you have to be able to do it, but the mindset capacity, which is what we're talking about here, right? Increasing your ability to deal with different levels of complexity. And because when we were, again, if we go back to early childhood, we did not have that ability. That's why I didn't understand that me being kept in for recess was just simply because I needed to learn English, right? It was too complex for me to understand. But now as an adult, I'm like, oh, that was simple. Okay. So I don't look at it like, oh, I should have been doing this 20 years ago when I started coaching. No, I was doing coaching exactly the way that I needed to. And I was attracting clients where that's what they needed at the time. Right. But now I coach clients who deal with a lot more complex challenges and, I'm able to deal with it. I think one of the things that's really dangerous is when we try to, coach, develop, deal with, situations that are beyond the level of complexity that we're able to deal with. Right. Because then we're not doing anybody any good.
That's exactly right. So do you mind if I ask you something else about this actual process, the protocol that you're working through? And maybe I missed this, so I just need a little more clarification on it. Tell me about how you get your client emotionally connected to that future state. So when we're asking them, when we're focused on the result we're looking for or the end game, and then we work backwards. Talk about the emotional connection to that future state. How do we create that? So that's helping to guide them along as well.
First of all, I'll say I don't try to get my clients anywhere. I think my biggest rule of thumb is I meet my client where they are. And so if they are not ready to, if all they can do is stay at the action level, we're staying at the action level. I might be aware of everything that I'm talking about, but I'm not going to push them there. I'm not going to be like, oh, it's never going to work. Right? We're going to do what we can. So I have some clients where, listen, we're color coding the Outlook calendar, and that's, that's what we're doing. We're not talking about beliefs and all that.
Okay.
I think that, most of my clients, they are very outcomes driven, right? So it's not so much that I frame it in terms of emotional connection. It's much more around, I ask them very simple questions. What is it that you want, right? In the language that they understand. What are the conditions of satisfaction 12 months from now? How are you defining success 12 months from now? And I don't do the emotional connection, I don't think, for many of them. What I will ask is, what's the why? Right? What's the why? And I ask it with, and I tell them, no judgment as to what the why is. Really. I will sleep well at night no matter what it is. You just need to know what it is. And the reason being is when you put a stake in the ground, that's the direction you're heading in, there is inherently a trade-off that you're making. And you have to be able to be at peace with the trade-off. And being at peace with the trade-off is all about the why. And as long as you're okay with that why, that's all that matters.
Yeah. See, that to me, and I'm so glad you brought that up. That why to me, that greater purpose, that thing that I must do this, right? There's a reason for this. Everything I do is rooted in that reason and that why. That to me becomes kind of the emotional component to it because I tie so much to that why. Because if it's big enough, if it's important enough, if it undergirds everything that I do, that's powerful. That to me is emotional. That's heart.
Yeah. And I think, look, it works in terms of getting them to then understand what is driving it. I think sometimes it goes a step further, and this is where they have to start questioning is, particularly if they are leading others, is getting them to understand that their why may not be everybody else's why, right? And so their expectation, I had a client once where, look, was a big financier guy, and his why was pretty simple. He wanted to make as much money as possible. That was it. No judgment on my end, really. I think, again, because of my background, I have heard it all about what the whys are, and I'm okay. That's your life. We're good. I'm like, okay, that's great. And now let's talk about what that looks like in terms of the way that you act with everyone else, because he had the belief of, I know I'm right. So the way that would trickle down is he would lose, he saw everything as like, if we're losing time, we're losing money. So guess what he was doing? He would be in these meetings and be like, why the heck are we talking about this? I already know what the answer is. We can cut it short in 5 minutes. He would talk over everyone, be really condescending to people. And he was leading people. So it would be fine if he was an individual contributor or if he was a solopreneur, that would be absolutely fine. But he failed to understand that this belief as I know I'm right was not aligned with him now having to also lead people. And when we dug into, well, why do you drive with that? It was like, well, I want to make as much money as possible and blah, 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 and we're wasting time, etc. Okay, so what does it look like if that's your driver and everybody else's driver might be different? Where's the intersection? So I wasn't asking him to lose his why. What I was asking him is, how do we expand your why so that there's room for others, because you need the others to get to that point, the point that you want to make.
That is so good. That is so good.
I don't see, so many times I have clients and people who use the word, change. Oh, I'm going to have to change who I am. And I'm like, this is not about changing who you are. And it's not about losing these beliefs at all. It's not about getting rid of these beliefs. It's about expansion. It's about having more range, right? It's about your ability to now say, oh, I can actually see again that there's multiple perspectives, or I'm holding a lot of different pieces to it. How do I hold all of it rather than just stay on a single lane while I'm driving on a multi-lane highway?
Great analogy. Okay, so you did, how you did it was quite fantastic, but you were able to weave two different examples, two different blockers, hidden blockers into that piece of the conversation, and I really appreciate that. So I just want to remind everyone that's watching and listening right now that we are talking about Leadership Unblocked, and clearly we just do not have the time to be able to go through each of these hidden blockers. But most importantly, I wanted you as our audience to be able to at least get a taste of what this book is going to provide you. So, Muriel, would you just share with all of us who this book is meant for? When you wrote this book, and I know a little bit of the backstory about when you wrote it, how long it took you to write it, and what it must have been like for you to bring the book to life. But when you were thinking about writing the book, who were you picturing in your mind? Who is this best suited for?
Yeah, it's so interesting. So first of all, let me say I was a very reticent second-time writer. I swore after my first book I would never write another one, and I held out for 13 years. And this isn't something that I had thought a lot about. It's just sort of an idea that kind of percolated up, and then it wouldn't let me go. And who I really thought about was anyone who is on a leading path, whether they are an aspirational leader or they are already in a leadership position. Quite frankly, that they are in a position where they are dealing with the challenges that anyone in a leading position faces. So in the most universal term is if you have challenges, in your leadership role or as you lead, this book is for you. Because again, it goes back to my whole mission and what drives me in terms of not only the work that I do, but just the way that I, move in this world is I want folks to just be able to live with a little bit more ease. And so if we could learn how to deal with our challenges or what we see as challenges with more ease, not only would it make a difference for you, but boy, would it make a difference for all the people that you're leading.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's the qualifier. If you ever feel like you have a challenge, this one's for you.
That's so good. And I got to tell you, I mean, from my perspective, I've been in different leadership roles before. Today, I coach clients and coach entrepreneurs. And, this book is incredibly helpful for me as well.
Yeah.
But, to your point, if you're on a leadership path, fantastic. But I would also just add that I feel that this book is fantastic for anyone who wants to become a better leader for themselves. My belief has been, and I did not have this belief early in my career, but now I believe that we have to be the most effective leader within, the most effective self-leader in order to lead others. If you want to build a sustainable business, if you want to be the best leader you can be in a community or for your family, you've got to do the work on yourself first. And this book will definitely provide you with the tools to be able to do that. So I want to thank you for that. And Muriel, as we are wrapping up our conversation today, I know I could speak with you for hours. You'll
have to have a part two.
I love you. Yeah, I love your brilliant mind, and I love what you're sharing with us. So here's my question to you: if you had an opportunity to sit down on a park bench with any one person who's either currently living or that's no longer with us, and you could ask that person one question and one question only. First, who is it that you would want to sit down with? And then number two, what is the one question that you would want to ask?
Oh, Jay. There's so many people I'd want to sit with, but I'm just going to go with who came to mind right away today.
Please.
In this moment.
Okay.
It would be my mom, right? And she passed away a couple years ago. The question I would ask her, very simply, I would say, tell me your story. What's your story? Yeah.
I love that. Tell me your story. Oh, that's so good. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
I have one final question and then an ask for you. First, are you proud of yourself today?
I am.
Good.
I'm proud of myself today. I'm proud of myself every day. I am.
That makes me happy. I'm so glad to hear that. And then here is my
Doesn't take
ask.
much, Jay.
Hey, look, you've been through a lot. You've experienced a lot. And I'm so glad to hear you say that. So here is my ask. I would love it if you would give all of us, including me, one challenge. What is one thing that you would challenge us to do?
I would challenge you the next time that you feel like you're being challenged by something outside of you, whether it be a person, a situation, a context, even the news, is to ask yourself, in what way am I contributing to how I feel right now? What
a great question. All right, my friends, you heard it. I certainly hope you are going to take Muriel up on that challenge. I know I'm going to, and this is something I'm going to remind myself of, because we all have enough of those situations that come up that we can ask ourselves that question. So thank you for that. And Muriel, I want to thank you so much for joining us today on Business Minds Coffee Chat. What a phenomenal conversation. So insightful. I really appreciate you allowing us to pull the curtain back a bit, learn more about you, about your story, about your mindset, how you think, what you've learned throughout life. And thank you. I just want you to know how grateful I am for you.
Thank you. Thank you. The feeling is mutual.
Absolutely. And for all of you, I want to thank you so very much for watching and for listening. And I do have a quick favor. Would you please take just a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts? That helps us expand our reach and attract amazing guests, just like you heard today. And to listen to more podcasts, all you need to do is visit jscherbusinessconsulting.com, click that podcast button. And my friends, until next time, keep learning, keep growing. Make sure you run out and pick up a copy of Leadership Unblocked. And please apply the lessons you learn. And we'll see you on the next Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care, everybody.